You're listening to the Soju Sessions, episode 8, on the Soju Talk Nation podcast feed. The advancements in technology and connectivity coincided with the growth in K-pop and Korean entertainment during the 2010s. As visibility changed, so did the global demand for content. Korean shows with distinct cultural norms became wildly popular and served as the entry point for fans around the world. Coming up, Therese and I discuss the variety shows that grow our fandom, the evolution of online content, and our favorite idol moments. Joining me today to talk about variety shows and the interconnectedness of virtual media in K-pop is Therese. Welcome, Therese.
I'm here.
How are you today, Therese?
Pretty good. Kind of icky outside, but otherwise, spirits are high.
High spirits with cloudy weather and the internet to help keep us all regulated with everything that we consume and experience every day, I'm sure. So today's topic is variety shows and what that does to formulate our bonds and connections to K-pop as a medium and the idols that we so fondly love and adore. Kind of start things off for you, Therese. What was your first introduction to variety shows, and how did you make that connection between variety shows and K-pop as an entertainment cycle, and also the idols themselves?
I guess my introduction would actually be like YouTube crack videos, just like fan-made compilations of stupid stuff the members do. And I didn't really understand what I was watching for a while. I was just like, where did all of these clips come from? Like, who was letting them act so funny and ridiculous? Because, we don't get to see this side of a lot of American pop artists. So it definitely drew me in even more into K-pop because it gives you that different sense of connectivity with your idols.
Yeah, I think that is a very similar story to how a lot of people on the internet who've grown up in the past 10, 15 years have come across interest, especially with K-pop, because to us it is a foreign media, it is a foreign piece of art, so we don't have everyday exposure to it on TV or in the news like people who like people in Korea would have on a regular basis.
Right.
But for me, very similar. A few groups here and there that I enjoyed, and I would start watching their music videos and then get recommendations. Sometimes those recommendations would be official media, oftentimes not, because the internet is a vast, grand place for self-expression and affection towards the things that you like, especially idols in K-pop. But then once I started to dig a little bit deeper to find out how these videos were put together and like the origin for a lot of these clips is when I found variety shows. And I thought it was really interesting that there is such a big difference with how idols and entertainers are portrayed in K-pop in Korea as opposed to in the United States and Western markets. And I did want to ask you, what do you think is the purpose of variety shows, and why is there such a big contrast to the way Eastern cultures interpret and express their entertainers through variety shows as opposed to here in the United States and in the West?
I think it's apparent that they just want to show off different sides of an idol because, the intense training idols go through, it really rounds out all aspects of their persona and how they present themselves to the public. But a lot of what people know is just either their vocals or their stage performance and their talent, but they don't know who the people are themselves. So Variety gives them a good look into like sides of them that you would not see in an interview or other things. It's just like the goofy sort of hang out with you on the weekends type of person.
Yeah,
But
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think Western media is definitely starting to catch on, especially with like for instance, Jennifer Lawrence, everyone really fell in love with her when she came out as like not really an actress. She was just a normal girl, and people really liked seeing normal sides of celebrities.
Yeah, it makes them more relatable, right? It kind of grounds them
Right.
into similarities that you and I would typically encounter, whether it's like personality traits that we find similar, or um, kind of that growing up feeling of, your friendly neighborhood, like kid around the corner that you kind of know by from a distance, but you always knew you grew up with them, but you don't really know
Yeah,
exactly who they are. Um, yeah,
it's like seeing celebrities on TV and being like, wow, I could have totally went to school with them.
yeah, right. It really just gives you a sense of connectivity to kind of their story and their background and their history. Um, Kind of what I learned later about variety and just the way things operate in Korea, Korea specifically with K-pop, is that for a lot of new groups and new idols and entertainers, they're still developing their sense of self and their context within the grand scheme of entertainment. I think Doug actually mentioned this on the show a number of times when he talked about his favorite variety, and that idols and groups are given these opportunities on shows like Running Man, Knowing Brothers, and Idol Room and Weekly Idol, to help develop their personalities and their characters with veteran entertainers. And I think it was really clear when I started watching Idol Room a couple years back that that was the case. When you had the host Donnie and Connie, who were very extra and like extravagant with like the way they talked about things, and I mean they're very clearly trained comedians and they know how to improv and bounce off the script. Obviously, there's editing and there's direction, but their job is to make the idols very comfortable and to kind of pull out those personality traits and accentuate those characteristics. What are your favorite moments of idols opening up and expressing themselves on any of these shows that we're so familiar with?
I have to mention JB in a Got 7 on Weekly Idol episode 456. I have it in my notes. And a lot of Augustes would remember this. It was just, one of those days where the group was feeling a certain way, where they were extra goofy and doing some like over the top Eggio. That was like beyond cringy to the point where it was hilarious. So definitely stuff like that. Um, I will say, since they are like a more seasoned group, so they can be more comfortable around cameras and on variety shows. For other groups that aren't as comfortable, I've noticed a trend of them making their own variety for just the group that's done in-house, and that brings out more of their personalities because they're just around like their crew and the people they know.
Yeah, I think those are really important places for them to kind of develop and to bring in the fan base, right? Because a lot of the shows that have been popular in Korea for a very long time on broadcast network and broadcast stations, there is a little bit less control of how often they can produce content, when they can produce content, and also kind of not falling in line, but being helped navigated by the host and the entertainers.
Right.
But to kind of circle back on like kind of the main big shows that we've all seen clips of and put together on the internet, I think Knowing Brothers and Running Man are the two main shows that I still primarily watch, even for new artists and new groups. And I think
Hmm.
what those two shows do really well is that they bring in very seasoned entertainers, whether they're comedians or actors, or even guest appearances. And yes, there's a lot of editing. There's a lot of post production that goes into keeping you engaged in what you're watching. But I do think they do a nice job of balancing games and fun segments with a lot of personality development. Knowing Brothers in particular has segments at the beginning of the show, like the first 30 minutes, 40 minutes, where they're literally just asking questions and answering them. Obviously, doing things with a little bit of exaggeration, comedy, but you do
Just like
get,
some icebreakers.
yeah, some icebreakers, and it really like brings you into the conversation with them. How do you feel like these shows help develop the personalities and kind of um, break down like the emotional barriers of idols, whether they are brand new or learning something brand new about an idol who has been around for a bit longer. An example that comes to mind for me is Twice always goes on these shows like 2 or 3 times every year. You think, oh, there's nothing more I could learn about them. Well, remember the episodes with Momo and Hichul? It's kind of interesting seeing them interact with each other. Um, but I guess for you, like, who are some of your favorite idols that have been on those shows, and what were your different impressions or takeaways after certain episodes?
I think it's what you're getting at. Like, it's good for the idols themselves because it helps them interact with more people. Like, I'm sure idols interact with people on a daily basis, but we don't get to see that. And these shows is a good, safe way of like having them interact with outsiders, quotation marks. And like if that outsider makes fun of them or something, they have to play it off and either roll with it or like, I don't know. Um, and I think kind of a good example was Onda with Everglow. She was on, it was, I think it was Running Man. The whole group was on, and she didn't really have her set personality, like you're coming out and showing off who you are outside of an idol. And so she was trying something new with like impressions and it wasn't really going well. And you would think that it's kind of like a flop, but it also made her more likable as sort of a quirky character. And once she figured out like, oh, this isn't really a crowd pleaser, she started getting into other stuff, like doing exercise videos on her own, like Be Live and stuff. So you can see her really playing around with a lot of different um, hobbies, I guess, to connect with viewers as people instead of as entertainers.
Yeah, when things don't work out, it's typically an opportunity, right, to see what doesn't work, and then if you're bold enough to kind of fall into a completely different, um, I guess, style of how you want to present yourself and represent yourself as a personality, as an entertainer. Um, some of the things, well, one of the things that I really appreciate about a show like Running Man is the variety of guests and how they can kind of mix and match with who they want to put on the show. You mentioned Everglow was on an episode of Running Man. And I think they do a really nice job of using the games as a platform to help express personalities, build character, but then also
Hmm.
because the show is so big, because there are so many characters and actors on it, they can bring in other guests. I'm not 100% sure if that was the case with Everglow, but I have seen episodes where it's like two brand new girl groups are on the same show at the same time. There are something like 20 people on screen, and somehow they find a way to edit and mix and match all the members together. I forget which two groups it was, but Chunga was on an episode of Idol Room, I think 2 years ago. It was Bandit and someone else. I forget. But I remember there was something like 20 people on screen, and I was like, I don't know how this is working, but it
Yeah,
is. And it kind of
this
brings me
sounds
back.
interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting just like see how they manage. But also, like, granted, Korean entertainment tends to run longer with fewer
Oh yeah.
commercials. Like the runtime is like an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then you realize like, oh, I'm watching the streaming version that does not have commercials, so it's just an hour and a half of content straight. Okay, cool. Um, I want to circle back a little bit to like the Western media comparison. How this is so different, right? This is such a foreign concept to us. Are there
Right.
any analogs or parallels to this? I mean, I think you mentioned Jennifer Lawrence. You got to see a side of her, but are there shows and presentations of celebrities that are similar to this, where you get a peek into who they are, but you get a chance to see them grow as people as well?
I guess like the closest, most OG representation in Western media would be like SNL, but that's also not showing off celebrities as individuals. It's just showing like different sides of them, where they're trying to act. Like I know Elon Musk was on recently, um, and they've definitely had a bunch of celebrity athletes on. Otherwise, I guess like late night shows have developed. Granted, I didn't watch a lot of late night shows growing up because, of course, I was a kid. But I'm pretty sure recently they've gotten more conversational with their guests and playing a lot more games with them. Like when James Corden had BTS on with uh, Ashton Kutcher, and they did a hide and seek game where Ashton Kutcher had to find all of the members of BTS. That was hilarious. Just seeing like them interact with Ashton, and um, but I don't think that Western media is taking the same approach Korean media does with uh, you know, the variety formula, I guess.
Yeah, I think there are limitations to the way Western media is presented, right? Where it's very ad focused. It's actually
Hmm.
far more scripted than we realize.
Right.
With a lot of producers very much wanting a very concise product once it's broadcasted and presented, which is fair because a lot of money goes into production and a lot of advertisers need to make sure that their product is somewhat represented a certain way.
Hmm.
But it also kind of it actually reminded me that Ryan Reynolds was on Knowing Brothers a few years ago. Like as you said that,
Oh,
I was like,
I
oh,
forgot about
I
that
think
because
some
he did Masked Singer, right?
yeah. So Ryan Reynolds is the opposite case where you have someone who is very prominent in Western media essentially say, I'm gonna go to Korea and I'm gonna be awesome. So yeah, Knowing
And become
Brothers.
an idol.
Essentially,
Yeah.
God, yeah. This a peek behind the curtain. This is not in our script. I just like remembered it. Um, and I thought it was really fascinating that he did so well on Mass Singer, and then I think one of the main talking points was that he didn't know what was happening on Knowing Brothers. He just went along with everything because
That's good.
there's those producers there obviously, and there's a couple of people on the show that I know speak English. But I think he said like no, like I don't. I think the notes beforehand was just like I'm just gonna react to everything regardless if he understands. Um, and yeah, it kind of goes to show like the power and like the universal nature of like the type of content that Korea can output, and we all still can connect with it in some I don't know uh, some way within our soul, right? Um, to kind of flip back a little bit to like variety and the reasons why we connect with it. I know that you talked about you getting to know certain idols better and you forming a little bit more of a
Yes.
connection. What are some of the idols that you have formed a connection with? Whether that's idols that you already enjoyed and liked and your bonds grew stronger, or perhaps like brand new
Hmm.
idols that you had a vague knowledge about, but then grew to love because of their content.
Right. Well, usually my process in K-pop, getting into a group is just like, oh, I'll go through, if I like a couple of their songs, I'll go through their discography on Spotify. And that kind of sets up an algorithm based on the most popular groups. So you obviously hear more Blackpink songs than you would like uh, Cosmic Girls. But there are occasions that I watch variety, such as like After School Club, um, international friendly variety, and I just watch the show because I like it. So if they have a guest on that I don't really know, I'm still watching it. And I remember they had 86 on, and they had Girls in the Park on. And I really liked the personalities of the members in that show. And when I started like laughing along with them and finding them really likable, I would listen to more of their music through that. And then I find out, oh, I actually really like a lot of their music. I just like, or I've heard this song, but I forgot about it because it wasn't brought up on my shuffle again. So it's a really good way of getting to know smaller groups.
Yeah, I definitely found a lot of some of my favorite small company groups through variety and through their personal content. I can name a few. We have Wiki Mickey, who
Mm.
nobody ever really thought that they were going to be the ones to come out of IOI produce season one. But it does seem like they are the most prominent and strongest group that's kind of still going. And it does show through all their variety appearances. I think they are variety darlings. If not the whole,
Aw.
if not the whole group, I know Yoo and Dohyun are on like a million things. Like they do so much entertainment in Korea. And then you have Everglow, like you said. Everglow, I think, is trying to follow in their footsteps in the same way where they kind of sneak onto different shows. Because I have seen
Okay.
Mia pop in here and there, Onda pop in here and there.
Hmm.
I forget the other members' names because they haven't come back in a while, but they will be coming back soon. So I will be all about
Kieran,
I will be all about
Aisha.
Everglow. Don't worry.
Oh.
Sorry, I remember the blonde ones somehow. Yes, of course, the blonde ones. I actually don't think they're blonde
You know that
anymore.
changes every comeback, right?
Yeah, I don't think they're blonde anymore. I think,
Eventually, you'll know all of them.
yeah. Well, like I just need to be in Everglow cycle again to strengthen my
Yeah,
resolve with their names.
I get it. I mean, May is stacked anyway.
Yeah. But I think the one idol that I am so happy that she has like blew up through variety, blew up through like internet content, and now has her own show, which she is hilarious on, is Jessi.
Yes, you're so right.
She kills it. So if you watch Running Man or Knowing Brothers, I would say 2 3 years ago, Jessi was still like Jessi is very well known in Korea as a vocalist, actually more as a vocalist than as a rapper. If you can imagine, that's weird.
Right.
But then when she signed up with P Nation, there was kind of a lull where she just wasn't active, and then
Mm.
she got back on all the shows. And then she got her own show, and it's just amazing that like all of her relationships, and like you can tell like people sincerely want to be on her show, and like they bond with her. And they do a lot of cool editing where it's like they show you the not behind the scenes clips, like, but the in between clips where it's like, okay, here's the segments, here's the things that are scripted, and then like we're just gonna let the camera run, and then we'll put that into the show anyways.
Ah, that's cute.
Yeah. Well, I wax poetically and fondly about Jessi. Is there anything about Jessi that really sticks out to you of why she is such a variety darling?
I mean, she kind of did the Ryan Reynolds thing, where I mean, obviously she's well known in Korean media, and but she does have more of an a Western personality where treats everyone like her friend, which um, isn't common in Korea. So I think she does well on Variety and stuff because she's just rolling with it, and she's able to play on certain guests and certain hosts and just fit well into every equation.
She's very loose with honorifics. Let's put it
Yeah.
that way. Very flexible with the idea of someone being older or younger than you. Yeah, and I think she does a really nice job of letting them be comfortable enough with her as a person to do that, and then also like playing it up, so then it's a bit. You know that because the cameras are on, it's got to be exaggerated and be that extra because one, Jessi is extra, and two,
Yeah.
um, uh, she's American is what she likes to remind everyone. She is
Yeah.
American all the time, and I think it's a really nice entry point for us and people like in the Western United States where we want so much to have Korean entertainment and K-pop content be readily accessible to us, but there is the language
Mm.
barrier. We have to wait for subtitles. But when you have an idol who kind of crosses that barrier and kind of lives in both worlds, she can uh, she can translate literally and also metaphorically, where she could be that bridge for cultures, where we can gain a little bit more insight into Korean culture and why they do things a certain way. But at the same time, she's also exposing Korean culture to how hilarious we can all be in the United States if we kind of just don't take ourselves too seriously, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I just really love Jessie and what she's doing. I if I ever meet her one day, I would love to talk to her and just pick her brain about the world. Um, Kind of closing up on a little bit on like the broadcast, like the formal variety and content. What are some of your favorite formal variety and content? And how how should I put this?
Like the shows?
How dedicated are you to keeping up with a lot of these pieces
Uh,
of content for your groups?
um, I'd say the only variety shows that I watch regularly are probably Running Man, or not Running Man, Knowing Bros, and After School Club, and then Run BTS, but that's purely because BTS. Um, yeah, I'd say it's definitely, I'm casual about it. I only ever put it on like when I'm doing stuff around the house. Um, but I know that like with certain groups, you're gonna get funnier content than others. So I definitely follow like whatever Got7 is on, or BTS, or ITZY, of course. Just because I know the members and I think they have funny reactions. So if they ever drop like new variety and stuff, I'm usually bound to watch it.
Yeah, and it's one of those where it's like we get familiar with our favorite groups, and then we can kind of just have them living in our space with the content
Mhm.
that they put out. And it's kind of nice, right? It's one of those homey feelings where it's like it's familiar, it's always there, it's reliable, and it kind of goes into this idea of K-pop as a medium and why it's so different from Western media and kind of the access and entry that we have into the lives of these idols as entertainers. I'm reading a book right now. Well, I've been reading it for about a year or so, kind of on and off, and kind of just doing my own personal research by Professor Suk Young Kim. She's a professor at UCLA in critical studies and the director of the Center for Performing Arts and performing arts study, sorry. And she wrote a textbook on K-pop and media called K-pop Live. And in the textbook, she opens with this idea of K-pop liveness and how virtual content is an element of that liveness in the sense that you are now transported into the lives of these people that you love and adore, these entertainers, these singers, these
Mm.
dancers. And it's just so very different from the Western model of almost a separation in your movie stars, your actors, your singers. And it kind of brings me like full circle with YouTube because we started the conversation by talking about YouTube crack videos, like those fan
Yeah.
edits. And then we moved on to the Korean structure of broadcast television and things that are done with a lot more resources, very high production. But now a lot of those companies, a lot of those entertainment companies are moving back into YouTube, creating online content, almost creating a
Yeah.
positive feedback loop of giving access to your idols through content that they produce, but that's on YouTube, which is accessible to everyone in the world. So now they can absolutely put translations and subtitles, but if there aren't, and they allow access on YouTube, fans do it. Fans can do it
Right.
anytime. So it's one of those where it's like we've kind of come full circle with how accessible K-pop is, not just as a media with us looking for that type of content online through YouTube, through fan edits, but now companies are putting resources and effort into making it accessible to everyone outside of Korea. And I wanted to highlight a few of my favorite pieces of content that kind of spoke to me, that went beyond just that connectedness, that liveness to idols, but now look, looking to tell stories, looking to go a little bit deeper on the history of who these people are, everything they've done, and what music and entertainment means to them. So we have IU's Palette. which is on her official IU YouTube channel. It's excellent. She really uses her relationships with her idol friends for the past 20 years or so. Brings them in and has really like deep conversations about life and everything they've all been through, all the shared experiences. They play games.
She also have her brother on at one point.
Yeah, I think that was one of the most recent episodes, if I'm not mistaken.
That was so cute.
Yeah, and it's really wholesome. I mean, it's very like on brand with who we know of what we know about IU. But at the same time, you can definitely tell that her music experience very much. I'm gonna make a pun. Very much paints the picture of how she has a conversation with the people in her life. So you mentioned the episode with her brother. What was have you watched any of the other episodes, and which ones were your favorites?
I think I started watching them, but I fell off. I just really like IU as a personality, and I think she's really talented. So usually when I'm watching her, it's a performance, like her unplugged, what's it called? Her killing voice, or just her hanging out.
Yeah. She did a couple that really stood out to me. And so she actually did one with Oh My Girls, Sungi, and I think it's Hyojung. Yeah, I think it was those two. I think that was before she officially called it IU's palette. I think it was actually for a different company, but that was kind of the genesis of this idea of bringing on different idols and talking about like music and life and like doing games, and that was a few months after Nonstop last year, so that was still like Oh My Girl's peak. And then she launched palette, so she had Itzy on, and then she had Shiny on, which was amazing. I love.
Oh, I think I did see that one.
Yeah, so it was so good, and it really goes to show you the bond that they've all shared, because they talked about like old war stories of like being an idol when they were like 16, 17. I think like she talked to Taemin. It's like, yeah, Taemin, remember when you were 16? I was like, oh my god, these guys.
The whole second gen internet wars.
Yeah, and just like going through like I guess like the young like stages of the internet, and like we like to think that the internet has evolved and grown, but man, it was rough back then.
Like, I can't even imagine being a celebrity and growing up with the internet. That sounds so scary.
Yeah, children of the internet, where your life is completely exposed. So
Yeah.
but yeah, you can definitely tell there's a sincerity in like the conversation and the way that she interacted with Shiny, right?
Cool.
Yeah, and I think it also like is another empowering moment for idols to create their own content, to have their own platform and their own voice. Another channel that I really enjoyed is Hello 82, and they kind of incorporate a lot of Western themes and Western spin on involving the audience, whether that's like fan participation, creating content with like kids who are like English speaking kids, with these idols. And to me, it feels like it's making these idols more accessible universally to everyone. Have you caught any of the Hello 82 content?
I probably have. I just don't recognize like, I'm not looking at the channel when I'm watching it. I'm just taking it as, oh, another variety show.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, is that the one where Shiny brought in those kids that like reacted to their career?
Not yet.
That one?
No,
Oh.
not quite. But it's similar.
Yeah. See, I always confuse all.
Yeah. No worries.
All the
I mean,
channels.
it's just that's the thing, right? Because it's YouTube content, and like the way that the interview, like the visual setup is so similar. I can understand why like you wouldn't be able to differentiate between. But
Right.
we can get into it. So ODG is also another YouTube channel that I love and adore, and their premise is that you were a kid once. So really letting idols reflect on their career through the lens of how a kid may perceive them at different points in a child's life, a child's experience. So they do bring in kids from kids at different ages and different points in their life as well, to kind of reflect with them just how they interpret the song, they interpret the music, or how they interpret like the entirety of someone's career. So, like you said, Shiny. Um,
Mm.
well, you saw the Shiny one. How did that one hit you, and what did you take away from that experience?
It's so hard. Um, I don't really know Shiny that well, so seeing them in variety and stuff is still new to me, but I know some of their stories. So I was more relating to the kids, watching their old music and stuff and saying like, oh, that's kind of dated now, but it's still very likable and translates well to the future. There was that moment where one of the kids asked why one of the members was missing, and they had to explain, oh, well, he was sick, so he can't be in the group anymore. And to the fans that know, one of their members completed suicide, which was devastating. And the kid, like, obviously had no clue, so they were asking, like, oh, okay, so he wasn't a bad person, meaning like he didn't go through a scandal to get kicked out of the group. And they're like, no, no, he's not a bad person. So it's very interesting seeing kids, they're growing up with this common theme of like, oh, someone did something bad, so they got kicked out of the group. Whereas we're looking at it as international fans and as older people, just like, oh, well, they made a mistake. That's really unfortunate. Yeah, it's just very touching, seeing two different perspectives crash like that.
Thinking back to when you were a kid, how similar or different do you feel like your experiences are with the kids on the show?
Um, I guess as a kid, I didn't really think my opinions mattered that much. Like, oh, well, I like something and I have a phase of it. Like, oh, I really like uh popcorn and I only ever want to eat popcorn. Some kids on that show are like, no, this is my thing. This is what I do and they own it. And they're just like, my opinions matter because people ask me. I think that's really cool. Like people seem more sure of themselves because they're exposed to more things and they're um able to say definitively, oh, I like this thing and I don't like this other thing.
Do you,
I don't know if that answered your question,
no, it
but
was great. Do you feel like that's a result of our current evolution with technology, or do you feel like those are inherent personality traits that we've always had and in whatever era? So, for example, just like being in a kindergarten class with 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, and definitely seeing like the popular kid or like the extrovert introvert, the athletic kid or the art kid. Do you feel like the show does a nice job to represent the variety of personalities that children could exhibit and express when,
yeah.
I guess, when interacting with adults?
Yeah, I think it's cool how like some kids really like some things and other kids really like other things. It really shows off, there's all different types of people in the world, and I think kids now understand that more than when we did, when we were growing up in our local communities and, having to ask our parents to hang up the phone so we could use the internet. So there's definitely more outreach.
Yeah, and I think it's really cool that like the internet allows for that visibility, right? Where yes, like it does feel like the way in which like we connected with the rest of the world was so small scale. It was only within our personal like bubbles of the people that we knew and the people in our neighborhood. But ultimately, as this show kind of like it gives a great example of, is kids have so similar experiences no matter where you grew up. And I mean that in like the broadest sense of kids feel emotions similarly. Kids grow up with emotions similarly. Kids grow into their insecurities almost in the same way. I think it was so my favorite episode of all time from ODG is the Lehigh episode where she debuts Holo, and she interviews three girls at different points in their life. So I think there was like a like a 7-year-old, 8-year-old, like around that age. And then you had like a middle school kid, and then you had a kid who I think was entering high school or was in high school. And you can tell all three of them had different concerns and worries and perspectives on the world. Where you have the youngest being the most bright-eyed and optimistic of everything that she has in front of her. And then you had the middle kid who was still very concerned for her family and just like very concerned for what she had control over, right? But then you can tell the self-awareness starting to develop. And then you had the older girl who was now so much concerned about like the future and her place with finding a job and maybe being able to support her mom and dad. And to circle back to Lehigh, her song is about being alone and what that means for everyone, because it means something very different depending on what you need as a person and how you choose to navigate your own personal emotions. And I feel like that type of storytelling and connectivity was just so powerful to give that song even more meaning than it already currently has. To kind of wrap up ODG and kind of their direction, how they want to tell stories. What's something that you would want to tell yourself as a kid at any point in your life? So pick a point that had the strongest inflection point to you. What would you want to tell that version of yourself today about how you would end up navigating the rest of your life?
I would tell my younger self that people do not care nearly as much as you think they do. I think taking away a lot of growing up with a lot of anxiety of just like, oh my gosh, what if I do something wrong? It's okay. People are going to make fun of you, but they'll forget about it like next week, at least in middle school, high school. Um, just don't take yourself so seriously. You're still a kid.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important message about how we internalize trauma. I know everyone likes to think, well, the general idea of trauma is like these big events in someone's life where trauma can be experienced on a daily basis in different ways. There is something called microtrauma where you're just experiencing something so readily all the time that you don't necessarily see it as trauma until it manifests somewhere else down the line in your life. And I think what you said is really important. I think we do all kind of need to take life a little bit lighter, and remember that a lot of things in the world have very short attention spans and short memories. And yes, like,
Well,
go ahead.
especially when you're a kid and that's all you know is high school or whatever. So it's hard to differentiate, just because I kissed this boy, the whole world doesn't care.
Yeah,
Like maybe your high school does, and all the kids in it because they have nothing else better to do. But
yeah,
in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter.
yeah. In the grand scheme of things, of the things that you're doing, as long as you are being kind to others and you're not deliberately taking away someone else's agency or attacking
Right.
them, which I don't think like any of us here who listen to this podcast, you and I in particular, do to anybody. I think we are generally good people, and I think if you're generally a good person, um,
Hopefully that's not a hot take.
I didn't mean it to be. But I'm just saying, like, I think most people are generally good people, and it's that lasting effect of remembering that you can have a positive effect on someone even if you're internalizing something negative about yourself. And I think those are kind of the lessons that ODG does a really nice job of visualizing, encapsulating, and then presenting through the lens of children with idols. So yeah. Closing out today's episode, we're just gonna have a little bit of fun with variety, and we're gonna loop it into current events with Kingdom. So
Kingdom.
Therese is the big
Great
Kingdom
kid.
fan
Cool.
here. So this is actually 2 episodes ago, but I wanted to bring it up because I do think it was interesting that they decided to do this to an episode. So they turned it into one enormous variety show where they had all the boys play athletic games with each other, and if you're into it, you were simping them super hard. So, Therese, take it away. What did you think? How'd you like it? And what were these gentlemen mounting?
All right, well, I feel like I'm getting directly called out here. Uh, so yeah, this is basically if you watch anime, this was like the school fair athletic festival episode of Kingdom, and it was just like two groups of th three three different K-pop groups grouped up into one team. And there were two teams. Six groups, two teams. Yeah. Anyway, they were competing, the two teams are competing against each other in just like athletic prowess. So the first one, I forgot what it was called. Is it like a pommel horse? It's like you have to jump over a hurdle from a springboard. And the most of the episode was each individual member trying to complete athletic tasks. But, you know, some people are more athletic than others, even though they can dance really well. Jumping over a giant hurdle is probably harder than it looks. I don't know. There were some really funny screen caps where some of the guys would jump up on the hurdle and just end up sitting there because they couldn't get over, or they just jump up and hug it because they didn't even like nearly get over it. Lots of good stuff, lots of camaraderie. It was really fun seeing the groups interact with each other in a non-professional setting. And they had some other parts in the episode where they had to vote for the visual king, just like taking selfies and then going around saying, who's the most handsome out of all of you here? And then they had the what was that caterpillar thing race that they were doing? Do you know what it's called?
I
It was
wanted,
basically like
I wanna say something really degenerate. I'm not going to. I know if you've seen the episode, you know they're doing. It's essentially like a snake game. So like a snake eating another
yeah,
snake. Yeah.
yeah. Those are some hilarious drone shots they got of just like lines of boys running after each other and trying to beat the crap out of
Yeah.
each other. I don't know.
Shout out to drone shots. I think this was like the most effective use of drone shots yet on this show.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Very comedic drone shots, which is not usually done.
Yeah,
So yeah,
the episode was really interesting in that like it was such a big departure from your expectation of Kingdom. Um,
right.
and I think,
I would
oh, go ahead.
I really wish they had performances, but you know, you get what you get, and I didn't hate it. How did you feel about it not like standing boy groups or really knowing the idols themselves?
I think I had to take I had to think about it intellectually because on the one hand it's like okay, I'm watching Kingdom to watch like performances um and like the relationship building and like why like certain wins and losses mean more to certain groups or how the wins and losses affect between groups because they got to know each other. So on the one hand it's like oh, I didn't get like the actual performance and like premise of Kingdom. On the other hand, like thinking intellectually, one, as a fan, this is fan service. If I like boy groups, if I like all these boy groups, give me all the fan service. I'm here for it. Two, this is kind of how you establish relationships that you wouldn't normally be able to because of COVID, because of the pandemic. Because all the groups are separated, they have little to minimal interaction with each other in the studio. This is probably like their opportunity to say like, okay, we're gonna put them all together and make them like physically close to each other in an athletic competition, so we can get away with it. This is what you get. And honestly, if the goal was to learn more about the personality and have that liveness connection that K-pop is known for, like a K-pop does so uniquely as opposed to like Western media, then I think it achieved it. I think this did a really nice job. Again, me intellectualizing this. Otherwise, if I wasn't thinking so deeply about it, I could and would have just preferred a performance
Right.
episode, but this is what we got. And honestly, this is
Were there any
go ahead.
groups or members that you now, based on this episode, that you now are going to watch more closely?
I think, and I think you're also leading me into something, but I will say, B2B, I didn't realize those old gentlemen were as athletic as they were. So I'm actually like, really, one, I'm impressed that they are as athletic as they are, and two, it kind of goes to show like if you're just because you're 20 doesn't mean you're at your peak physical specimenness.
Old gentlemen, as in like our age.
You can be
Or,
like
or
Peniel. Peniel, he looks like he could be 40. I mean, he's bald. Let's remember that. Like he also like looks like he's 40, but he's not. I think he's only like 25, 26.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then as you can see, like your physical peak actually hits in your mid 20s as opposed to like your early 20s. So there you go. Yeah, very impressive. I think that's probably the one group that like if I wasn't already sold by their vocal performance and their ability to like switch genres, now I'm like, okay, I think they are my favorite group.
Yeah. Kwang was so funny too.
He's got a lot of variety personality. Like you can tell like
Yeah.
he kind of glows in that way. Yeah, no, I thought it was an interesting choice, but we're here, and it did kind of lead me down to thinking about variety and the purpose of variety for K-pop and entertainment, and the audience connectedness to their idols and their favorites.
Hmm.
All that to say, like this is also a way for us to contrast how entertainers are perceived in other parts of the world, and especially in Western media, what access or lack of access we have to the people that we adore and have affection for. So yeah, I'm gonna close out with one final question for you, Therese. Now that you're an influencer, now that you create amazing TikToks for the Soju Talk Nation, are you going to start a YouTube channel, and will you start vlogging?
Oh God. Probably not, just because like making 30-second videos is hard enough. But
I think you have it in you. Well, if
I've definitely played around with the concept. I have a lot of like stupid ideas of like podcasts and stuff, or just like general videos. But yeah, it's a big time consumption thing. So, nah.
well, if Solar can exercise, sing, post thirst trap videos, and do everything she does on her channel, in addition to being an idol, I think there's hope for all of us.
Are you saying I'm being lazy?
I'm saying that I think there's hope for all of us. I think we can all aspire to be a little bit more thirst trappy like
We
Solar.
can all. Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone should be more like Solar. I agree with that sentiment.
Yeah. Well, on that note, thank you, Therese, for joining me for this pretty extensive conversation on variety and our access to idols through media and interconnectedness through kind of the virtual realm of K-pop and Korean entertainment. Is there anything you'd like to plug and mention before we head out?
Go listen to JB's new solo song. It's called Switch It Up. It's very good, and I want to support more GOT7 individual member stuff.
Nice. And also check out the Soju Talk fan TikTok account. Therese does excellent work there, and
Thank you.
the TikToks that she sends to the crew for the song releases, she does those. So that is all her amazing work to get the Soju Talk Nation, the Soju Talk main show podcast more visibility and more online content. So yeah,
Yeah, go follow, like, comment, whatever.
do all the things. All right, Therese. Well, thanks for joining me, and yeah, hopefully we'll chat again soon with more Got7 in the future.
Woo! Thanks for having me.
I want to thank Therese for joining me to share her perspective on how variety shows and online content informs her K-pop experience. Subscribe on YouTube, follow on Spotify or your preferred podcast platform, and continue the conversation on the Soju Talk K-pop podcast Discord. I'm Crispy, and this has been the Soju Sessions.